Saturday, the 22nd of August 2026, saw the beginning of the World Humanoid Robot Games in Beijing, China, which is exactly like the Olympics but with humanoid-style robots competing against each other. The events include judo, soccer, boxing, but also non-sporting events such as laundry folding. Wow. In one of the running events, one of the robots beat the 100-metre record previously set by the very human Usain Bolt. The cartoon dog's named after him, I believe. The robot completed it in 9.39 seconds in the event, beating Bolt's previous record of 9.58 seconds. Why have I got this as the introduction? We'll get there. Is this the future for sports? Will we be seeing human cricketers replaced? I'm sure that I do not want to see robot googlies. Thank you very much. I also don't think that will happen because then it isn't really sport but rather scientists trying to compete for the better technology. That's not really podcast news, I know, but the technology is interesting for sure. Imagine if they placed an LLM inside one of those higher functioning humanoid robots, as they are called, giving them a certain level of sentience. I know, that seems like I'm reaching into my science fiction loving imagination, but it is no longer outside of the realms of possibility. Also, I now wish that I could write fiction because I want to write about a humanoid robot that makes a podcast. Anyway, on with this show that is actually about podcasting. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and as well as the longest intro for this series, this is Pods Like Us Chronicles. On Monday, the 17th of August, a great article in Forbes appeared that was written by Frank Racioppi, entitled How the Audiobook and Podcast Overlap Can Morph the Podcast Industry. In the article, Frank talks about how there is a listener overlap between standard talk show podcasts and audiobooks, which is helping with Noiser having released audio drama versions of classic literature by writers such as Dickens, Conan Doyle, and Jane Austen. It's well worth your time reading it, and there are some great takeaways. Cody McLaughlin posted a Substack article on Monday entitled Is Podcasting Becoming the Evolution of Television? The piece is an interview with Brad Pipkin of IAB's Tech Lab. In the talk, Brad looks at how video is potentially telling us why, in his opinion, video streaming and better measurement are forcing podcasting to rethink its technical foundation. It's a fascinating article that is worthy of a pot of tea and some cake of your choice, and Brad's opinions are definitely informed. Among the items in the episode of Pod News Daily from Monday, James Cridland had an exclusive that Spotify now had shows of their own that have what they are calling unskippable ads, but also are saying that other shows can be skippable basically due to clauses in the contracts. In the same episode, he mentioned that the New York Times have a piece speaking about Inception Point AI. However, it comes at a time when they have now rebranded themselves as Liquify AI, the company behind Liquid Studios. Later on Monday, there was a post on Substack from Sam Illingworth, the author of the great book Slow AI, where he mentioned that a post of his had gone viral with 40,534 views, 575 comments, and 364 restacks. That is amazing. Sam also mentioned in another post that after someone had put Moby Dick onto Substack, they were informed that this document they had put on was 44% AI created. A book written in around 1780 or so, 44% AI created. Sure. That software is not as good as they think, is it? On the 18th of August, there was mention by James Cridland on Pod News Daily of how YouTube have now decided to change what a view means on their service, a week after they changed how people get paid for advertising. This is now called an engaged view, which roughly aligns with the AMP's consumption length. James also told us that Dan Murphy, one of the founders of XM Radio, now Sirius XM, has written a new book entitled The Pay for Water, that is about a country that once had free radio who decide to start charging $10 per month to do that. It's available everywhere that you can find your books. In the episode of Podmastery from Monday the 17th of August, where Neil Velio was talking about the importance of checking that your show's name hasn't already been used, but also gave us a very interesting learning experience that many of us will not have thought about, including Neil himself. How to explain this without giving it away? Well, how does someone hear your show title when people tell them about it, when they are out in public? Does it sound the same as you spell it? Can it be spelled some other way, what they have heard? Have they misheard the title? Just like how Sister Sledge staple the vicar and give love in a femidom in the song We Are Family. That misheard lyric metaphor is from me, by the way, and not Neil. The episode of School of Podcasting from the same day saw Dave Jackson looking at recent changes to podcasting on YouTube and Spotify, including a superb history of Spotify in podcasting, leading to the skipping ads or skipping forward button news. What is the smallest amount of downloads that you would make a show for? He asked. In the episode of In and Around Podcasting from the Tuesday, the 18th of August, it started wonderfully with Rob and Elsie talking about the history of skipping forward in the 1930s with reel-to-reel tape, through audio tapes, then CDs, videotape, and all the way up to today with Spotify's latest skip forward option. When they get by this bit, actually, almost 16 minutes into it as the intro, and then you get the show music, I was thinking about the new Spotify button that skips intros and advertising. So if someone was using that ability on Spotify, they would have missed the entire first 16 minutes of this episode because it was a 16-minute intro. And they would have missed something that was incredible in the process. After that, Elsie and Rob then looked at YouTube doubling the numbers of what is needed to get paid for advertising, and also Dave Jackson's School of Podcasting episode. After this, they looked at a huge amount of updates from Overcast. There was a nice tribute to the recently passed John C. Dvorak. They also noted that Anna Xavier sat with Barack Obama at the Obama Presidential Center And they mentioned Frank Racioppi's article in Forbes about in and around podcasting, the podcast. On Wednesday, the 19th of August, Frank Racioppi gave us an informed article about This Podcast Will Kill You, a show that explores the biology, history, and social impact of different diseases, medical mysteries, and toxins. That show is hosted by two disease ecologist and epidemiologist, Dr. Erin Welsh and Dr. Erin Ullman-Updike. And each episode dives deeply into a specific disease, e.g. COVID-19, plague, malaria, as well as poison or health topic like cancer or burns. In the same article, he also introduces us to Anti-Please, a cultural and lifestyle show created and hosted by two friends. The host, who identify as being raised by aunties and now stepping into that role themselves, focus on decoding Southeast Asian / Desi culture, midlife experiences, health, and the fear of Lok Kya Kahanj, which is what will people say. That article is on Frank's Substack. So if you go to Substack and look for Earworthy, that is Frank's Substack page where there are some fascinating and great articles. On Wednesday, we saw John McDermott release his must-read Random Thoughts newsletter. The newsletter started with how he believes that Dave Jackson's podcast, The School of Podcasting, released the best podcast episode of the year. He also mentioned that he is having trouble embedding Apple Podcast links into Substack posts. I personally use Podfollow links if I can. John also mentioned YouTube now changing how many views / consumptions are needed to get any revenue, doubling it from 4,000 to 8,000, as well as what accounts for those consumptions. John is also continuing to experiment with short-form video production. I expect humanoid-looking people a la Max Headroom. Actually, I'll take that back, because to me, Max Headroom in the 80s was more compelling viewing than watching people sitting at a computer talking to each other about something or other, with nothing else on the screen. At least the video version of Comic Book Nation has footage of what they're talking about, although I do miss them being sat at a news desk with each other. Well, other than Connor Casey, who is no longer at Comic Book Nation or comicbook.com, where he invariably used to be in a different room to the building to the rest of them because there were no extra seats for Connor, usually. Connor's also the one who gave the superb line, Christ on a Crouton Cracker, in December of 2023. I blogged about that back in the day. Anyway, back to John's newsletter. He mentions that he's going to use the feed he uses already because, as Dave explained, YouTube pays $2.25 per 2,000 downloads, but you need to hit 8,000 downloads before you get paid anything at all, and that isn't worth chasing. He also mentioned that the vertical video he made for one platform won't work for other platforms, etc. It's a pain in the neck. Also on Substack on Wednesday, Dr. Sam Illingworth was looking at the very real gaslighting by LLMs, with some very unusual responses to questions such as when Sam asked where it got his date of birth from, and the LLM's actual response was, I made a mistake in my previous answer and hallucinated that specific date of birth. What? What? You're an AI. What? Hallucination? What? Sam then continued with 3 other examples before giving ways to get around these issues. In the episode of Into the Podverse from Thursday the 19th of August, Tony started once again by looking at how podcast discovery has changed with LLM searches being a big thing. You can ask Claude AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, Siri, Alexa, and others about shows that have specific content. It's a good job I remembered to turn the Alexa device off in this room, isn't it? Those AI assistants then search for shows that fit those parameters that you've asked for, almost like a Google search on steroids. He also covered YouTube, podcast discovery, video podcasting, RSS feeds, hosting choices, and monetization, which includes the steps and risk of migrating from one podcast host to another. He also responded to a listener's question about whether to trust emails promising a large amount of monthly downloads, walking through what to check before accepting any growth offer. He also gave a shout out to Dave Jackson at the School of Podcasting for that episode that I mentioned earlier. In the episode of Pod News Daily from Thursday the 19th of August, James started with a great tool to counter advertising issues that comes from Flightpath, entitled Automation Playbook. YouTube have added an explanation to views and engaged views, and YouTube was actually a member of the AMP Accords, even though their own ways of doing things aren't in accordance with those. Good news from Ireland, apparently, as well in the show. James also mentioned issues with Megaphone, who are giving trouble with advertising as well. An episode of Sounds Profitable from the 19th of August, entitled That Stupid Radio, saw Gavin Gaddis reading out Tom Webster's great piece about a 9-button Italian radio that you had to use an app for in order to program the 9 buttons for specific digital radio stations. Now, though, the radio is pointless because the app doesn't work. There's a nice payoff at the end of the piece, by the way, Tom. On Friday's episode of Pod News Daily, James Cridland was a positive potato, as I called him, by giving us all good news only. Well, except for one that's veiled as good news. If you listen, you'll see what I mean. On Friday, Stephanie Fuccio published 2 items on Substack that told us how she was getting inspiration from the book On Writing, written by Stephen King, in her experiments in podcast show notes and titling. One of those was a post and the other a full-on article with descriptions, and it is fascinating. You can find Pods Like Us anywhere that podcasts can be found, and all of the links to the social media and email are available on the opening page of themarvzone.org. That's the Marv, spelled M-A-R-V, zone.org. The show is distributed and sponsored by RSS.com, and we thank them for their support. Please rate and review the show on the platform that you are listening or viewing the episode on. All feedback is gratefully received, as it helps to know if there is anything that needs to be looked at. Thank you for listening, and I hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.
Admit it. Sometime in the last decade, you've proclaimed, "I'm leaving the U.S." Well, I did just that. In 2024, I left and went back to Peru, my home country. I was fleeing heartbreak, a health crisis, and the hole left in my wallet after said health crisis. I promised myself it would be temporary. But I just celebrated my 2nd-year anniversary in Lima, and if I don't actually sit down and think about whether I should go back to this American life, I might stay here forever. Accidentally. Unpopular opinion. I miss the US. I miss my friends. I miss living on my own. I miss the ability to order anything online and have it on my doorstep in a freakishly short time. More than anything, I miss its diversity. The US always felt more like a doorway to the rest of the world. And Peru? Well, Peru is a place with massive political instability, staggering social inequality, limited economic opportunities. We are home to the world's worst traffic jams, an insular culture.
The burbuja is where it's at.
The burbuja is where it's at.
And an addiction to inefficient bureaucracy that somehow runs entirely on WhatsApp. But Peru is also where I'm surrounded by family.
¿Quién es tu tía?
Inés.
Where I've reconnected with old friends.
Amiga, hola. ¿Cómo estás?
¿Cómo andamos?
Where the Pacific Ocean is a short stroll away. And where I can access a quality of life that used to feel out of reach. And yeah, the food is that good. And yet, I don't think I can stay here. I left my country for a reason, and I'm having a hard time letting go of the American dream. But what if being here is fulfilling another type of dream? Follow me as I try to find a good answer before my 3-year anniversary comes around. I'll discuss with experts, family, friends, and my own psyche what leaving the US and living in Peru means in terms of politics, finances, friendship, family, dating, and other quality of life issues to see if the grass really is greener here. Listen to But You Can't Stay Here wherever you get your podcasts.